the 60-year-old Mafia boss roared. "Open your legs. I'll keep going until my heir is in you." Night had settled over the realm, and in the shadow of the fortress, the world seemed to hold its breath. In a chamber high above the forest, Lord Darius Velorin, the 60-year-old master of the Velorin Syndicate, stood by the fire, his cloak catching the amber light like a shadow breathing. Power weighed him, old and relentless in the lines carved on his face and the steel in his eyes. For decades, he had ruled the kingdom of shadows with an iron hand. His name was feared in courts and marketplaces alike, spoken in hushed tones. Yet beneath the surface of dominance, a quiet longing gnawed at him, a longing for a legacy that would outlast him, a successor who could wield both fear and respect, and perhaps, if fate was kind, love in some form. Tonight the halls seemed unusually silent, save for the soft steps of a visitor who dared to tread where few did. Arya, the daughter of a minor lord who had fallen from favor, entered cautiously. Her hair, black as ravens' wings, framed a pale, determined face. Her eyes, bright with both fear and resolve, met Darius' gaze without faltering. "You asked for me, my lord," she said, her voice steady despite the chill in the air. Darius did not speak at once. He studied her as a sculptor studies marble, every angle, every shadow, every possibility. Arya was young, untested in the dangerous games of power, yet she carried a spark he had not seen in years, a spark that could either ignite loyalty or rebellion. "You have courage," Darius finally said, his voice low, like gravel rolling down a forgotten road. "Few survive the shadows of this keep and leave unshaken, but courage alone will not save you. You must learn to see the strings that bind the world and which you might cut." Arya swallowed, her fingers tightening around the edges of her cloak. "I wish only to serve," she replied, but Darius sensed she meant more than mere service. She sought understanding, perhaps even influence, and influence in his world was a dangerous thing to desire. "Serve, yes," Darius murmured, pacing the room, "but even servants have choices, and those choices can make or break kingdoms." His gaze lingered on her, sharp and unyielding. "You are not like the others, I see it in you. But there is a shadow upon your soul, fear, doubt, regret. You must face it or it will consume you." Arya felt a shiver, not of cold but of realization. She had spent her life hiding from the world's cruelty, believing obedience was her shield. Yet here in the presence of the most feared man alive, she understood that submission alone would not suffice. She needed strength, and perhaps she realized she needed him. The fire crackled, and in its light Darius moved closer, not threatening but deliberate, like a storm approaching a fragile tree. "Tell me," he said quietly, "what do you want, Arya? Power? Revenge? Or something that even you cannot name?" Arya hesitated. She had never spoken her desires aloud. To do so was dangerous, for desire in this world often led to death or betrayal. Yet something about Darius compelled her to speak, compelled her to admit the hunger she had long denied. I want to matter," she whispered. "Not just survive, not just be a pawn, I want to be remembered." A faint smile touched Darius' lips, rare and fleeting. "Then you will learn," he said. "You will learn that memory is forged not by mercy but by choices, choices that carry weight and sometimes blood." There was a silence, heavy and full of unspoken truths. Outside the keep, the wind carried the scent of the forest, dark and untamed. Inside, Arya and Darius shared a quiet understanding. Each of them bore scars, visible and hidden, and each had walked paths lined with betrayal and fire. "You will train with me," Darius continued, his tone final. "Not as a servant, not as a child, but as a partner. Perhaps you will rise or perhaps you will fall. Either way, you will be changed." Arya nodded, the weight of his words pressing on her like a winter frost. "I am ready," she said, though a part of her trembled. She did not yet know what trials awaited her, nor the depths of Darius' world. Night deepened, and the keep seemed alive with shadows that whispered secrets of old. Darius turned toward the balcony, looking out over the forest that stretched endlessly beneath them. "The world is cruel, Arya," he said softly. "But there is a way to bend it to your will if you are willing to face the darkness inside yourself." Arya followed his gaze, her heart beating in rhythm with the distant wind. "And if I am not?" she asked. "Then you will break," he replied, a statement, not a threat. "But even broken, there is a way to rise if you have the courage to claim it." In that moment, Arya felt the weight of destiny settle upon her shoulders. She had stepped into a world ruled by shadows and whispers, where loyalty was tested by fire and ambition by blood. And yet in Darius' presence, she sensed a strange kind of safety, a dangerous kind of trust. The sound of hooves echoed from the courtyard below, pulling their attention to the keep's gates. A messenger arrived, bowing low before Darius. "My lord," he said, voice urgent, "the northern lords have moved. They march under the banner of Lord Kaelin. They seek to challenge your claim." Darius' expression hardened, the warmth of the fire replaced by the cold steel of strategy. "They will learn," he said, voice low and measured, "that shadows are not easily conquered. Arya, you will stay close. Tonight you will see the weight of leadership and the cost of loyalty." Arya's pulse quickened. This was the world she had asked to enter, the dangerous, intoxicating world of power, strategy, and ambition. And she could not help but feel drawn to Darius, not just as a teacher, but as a man shaped by storms and solitude, a man whose fire burned as fiercely as the keep itself. As the messenger left, Darius turned to her once more, the flicker of the fire casting shadows across his face. "Tomorrow," he said, "we ride into the night. And when the northern lords see the strength of Velorin, they will understand that the past does not bind us, but it shapes the future." Arya nodded, though inside, her mind raced with questions, fears, and desires she dared not name. She had stepped into a realm of legends, of kings and curses, of dark forests and whispered prophecies. And now, she would walk beside the most formidable man she had ever known, learning, surviving, and perhaps changing herself in ways she could not yet imagine. The fire dwindled, leaving the chamber bathed in shadows. Arya watched Darius, studying the lines of his face, the steadiness of his hands, and the weight in his eyes. She knew that the days ahead would test them both, in loyalty, in courage, and in the quiet spaces between words. A sudden chill swept through the chamber, as if the night itself had drawn a breath. Arya shivered, not from cold but from anticipation. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the keep, unseen forces stirred, forces that would test their bond, challenge their power, and force choices that no heart could ignore. Darius stepped toward the balcony, his silhouette sharp against the moonlight. "Rest now," he said, voice barely a whisper. "Tomorrow the world will demand all that we are, and perhaps it will demand more than we are willing to give." Arya remained silent, her thoughts a whirlwind of fear and excitement. She knew that once the sun rose, her life would be forever altered. The path ahead was uncertain, dangerous, and thrilling. And in the quiet of Blackthorn Keep, amid the shadows and the firelight, she felt the first stirrings of something she could not yet name, a longing, a promise, a bond that would bind her fate to the man she had only just begun to understand. The wind rose again, carrying with it the scent of rain and earth. The keep seemed to hum with anticipation, as if the stones themselves remembered battles fought and loves lost. Arya took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of history beneath her feet. She was ready, or at least she would have to be, and somewhere deep within the forest, hidden eyes watched the keep. Shadows shifted, plans unfolded. The night was alive with secrets. And as Arya and Darius faced the unknown, one truth became clear. In a world of power and darkness, no heart remains untouched and no soul escapes the shadows forever. Cliffhanger. From the darkness beyond the keep, a figure emerged, cloaked in mist. Their eyes glimmered with knowledge of secrets that could shatter the Velorin legacy, and they were coming for Arya. Dawn broke over Blackthorn Keep like a pale promise, scattering silver light across the cold stone walls. Arya awoke in the guest chamber, the events of the previous night still heavy in her mind. The fire in the hearth had long burned low, leaving only embers that glimmered like distant stars. Her heart raced, still echoing with Darius' words that carried both challenge and the unspoken weight of something deeper. She dressed quickly, her hands trembling slightly, though she did not understand why. The world she had entered was no longer one of safety or shadows alone. It was alive, unpredictable, and waiting for her to step into its trials. By the time she reached the training hall, Darius was already there. The room smelled of iron and old wood, and the walls were lined with weapons of every kind: swords, daggers, and strange curved blades that gleamed like liquid night. The morning sun streamed through the narrow windows, casting stripes of light across the polished stone floor. "You are late," Darius said, his voice carrying a subtle note of disappointment. He leaned against a pillar, observing her with sharp, calculating eyes. "And yet, you move with the caution of one who knows danger may strike at any moment. That is good, very good." Arya bowed her head, hiding the rush of fear and excitement. "I will do my best, my lord," she said. Darius pushed off the pillar, his movements fluid and precise, though his age was visible in the slight stiffness of his joints. "Do not speak of your best. Speak only of your actions. Your words mean nothing in the shadow of war and strategy. Actions, those are remembered." The first lesson was simple: observation. Darius moved with the grace of a predator, demonstrating how to read an opponent's intentions, how to notice the slightest twitch or hesitation. He struck quickly with a wooden practice sword, forcing Arya to react. Each clash echoed through the hall, the sound sharp and bright against the morning silence. "You are too rigid," Darius said, circling her like a hawk. "Relax your mind, relax your body. You cannot fight what you do not understand." Arya's muscles ached and sweat pricked her brow. Yet, despite the pain, she felt a thrill, a spark of exhilaration that made her forget fear. Every strike she parried, every step she managed to anticipate, gave her the sense that she was no longer just a pawn in a dangerous game. She was becoming something more. Hours passed, and the training grew harder. Darius' lessons were not just about combat. They were about strategy, foresight, and understanding the hearts of men and women who moved through the world like pieces on a board. Arya learned to anticipate, to question, to read the silence between words as carefully as the movements of an opponent. By midday, they were both exhausted. Arya leaned against the wall, catching her breath, while Darius studied her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "You have potential," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Potential and fear. Fear is not weakness, it is a guide, but you must learn to control it, not let it control you." Arya nodded, though she did not know how to articulate the turmoil inside her. She wanted to impress him, to prove her worth. Yet she also felt something unnameable in his presence, a pull, a tension that went beyond teacher and student, beyond fear and respect. Before she could respond, a horn sounded in the courtyard. Darius' expression hardened instantly, his features shifting from calm authority to the predator's vigilance. "The northern lords have moved," he said. "Their forces are closer than we thought. Today, you will see the world outside these walls, Arya, and the price of leadership." They descended the spiral stairs to the courtyard. Soldiers moved with precise efficiency, their armor catching the sunlight as they readied for the march. Horses stamped their hooves, impatient and tense. Darius mounted his own black steed, a massive animal that seemed to mirror his master's strength and presence. Arya followed, her own mount smaller but spirited, eager to follow its rider. As they rode toward the northern border, the forest stretched out like a dark sea, trees swaying and whispering secrets. Darius did not speak, and neither did Arya. The air between them was charged, filled with the anticipation of what awaited. They arrived at the first northern outpost as the sun reached its zenith. Scouts reported movement, the northern lords' forces gathering in the distance. Darius studied the horizon with a calm that made Arya's chest tighten. Here was a man who faced threats that could destroy kingdoms, and yet he did not flinch. "You see," Darius said, his voice low, carrying over the wind, "war is more than swords and shields. It is fear, it is perception, it is patience. You strike when your enemy is weakest, not when you are strongest." Arya nodded, trying to absorb the lesson while hiding her rising anxiety. She had never been this close to real danger, never seen armies poised to clash, never felt the weight of decisions that could spill blood for miles. Yet, alongside that fear, a spark of excitement burned. She was part of something larger, something terrifyingly alive. That evening, the northern lords sent envoys under a banner of truce. Darius received them in a tent at the edge of the forest, his presence commanding the air. Arya watched from a respectful distance, noting how he spoke with authority, measured each word, and read the subtle reactions of the envoys with ease. "They underestimate you," she whispered when they were alone. "They always do," Darius replied, not turning to her. "Underestimation is a weapon if used correctly. But remember, Arya, it can also be a trap. Pride blinds more leaders than fear ever could." The northern envoys left, and Darius turned to Arya, the firelight catching the steel in his eyes. "You will learn," he said, "that power is never gentle. It demands sacrifice, patience, and cunning. And sometimes it demands trust in those you would rather not trust." Arya swallowed, feeling the weight of his words. Trust. She had trusted no one outside her family, and even then only partially. Yet, with Darius, she felt a complicated bond forming, one that stirred her heart and sharpened her mind. Night fell, and the camp was quiet, save for the distant calls of night birds and the rustle of tents in the wind. Darius and Arya walked along a ridge overlooking the northern army's encampment. The moonlight painted silver lines across the forest, making shadows dance like restless spirits. "Do you fear them?" Darius asked suddenly, his voice almost gentle. Arya hesitated. I do," she admitted, though she quickly added, "but not as much as I fear failing you." Darius considered her answer, the moonlight glinting off the edge of his jaw. "Fear can be useful," he said slowly. "It keeps you alert, keeps you alive, but fear without control, that is death." A silence fell between them, heavier than the night. Arya felt the weight of unspoken things, their differences in age, experience, and power. Yet there was a connection forming, fragile but undeniable, as if the night itself had drawn a line between their fates. Suddenly, a distant shout broke the silence. Arya turned, heart pounding, and saw a group of riders approaching the camp at full gallop. Darius' eyes narrowed, and he motioned for the soldiers to ready themselves. "They have sent a warning," he said, voice hard and urgent. "And this is only the beginning. Arya, stay close. Tonight, you will see why loyalty and courage are the only shields that matter." The riders drew closer, carrying a single scroll sealed with the emblem of the northern lords. Darius caught it with one hand and broke the seal. As he read, his expression darkened, the shadows in his eyes deepening. "They have chosen their move," he murmured, folding the scroll, "and it will change everything." Arya watched him, sensing the weight of a storm about to descend. She wanted to ask what the message said, but she knew it was not her place. Not yet. Still, her heart pounded with anticipation and a strange thrill. Danger, she realized, was intoxicating when faced alongside someone like Darius. As the night deepened, the wind carrying the scent of smoke and pine, Arya realized that she had stepped into a world where power and peril walked hand in hand, where every decision carried consequences that could echo for years. And somewhere in that darkness, unseen and patient, the northern lords were moving pieces on a board she was only beginning to understand. Darius turned toward her, his silhouette framed by the silver moonlight. "Rest now," he said, voice low and commanding. Tomorrow you will see the first test of your courage, and perhaps the first choice that will define your place by my side." Arya nodded, though her mind raced with questions, doubts, and a burgeoning sense of determination. She would not falter, not now, not ever. She had stepped into a world of shadows, of kings, of curses, and hidden power, and she would face it with every ounce of strength she possessed. Cliffhanger. As Arya drifted to sleep beneath the canopy of stars, a shadow moved through the northern camp. A figure, cloaked and silent, watched Blackthorn keep. Their eyes glimmered with secrets and intent, a warning that the trials ahead would be darker and more dangerous than either Darius or Arya could imagine. The night had deepened into a velvet shadow when Blackthorn Keep stirred with a sense of foreboding. Stars shimmered like distant eyes, indifferent witnesses to the lives below. Arya lay awake, listening to the distant whispers of the forest, every sound magnified in the silence. Somewhere beyond the walls, the Northern Lord's army shifted, a restless presence that seemed to pulse with intent. Darius had not slept. He walked the ramparts, cloak catching the moonlight, eyes scanning the horizon. Age had softened none of his vigilance. Every movement was deliberate, measured, alive with the awareness of threats both seen and hidden. He paused when he sensed Arya's presence behind him. "You are awake," he said, voice low, carrying the weight of quiet command. Arya nodded, stepping closer to the edge of the rampart. "I couldn't sleep. The forest, it feels alive tonight." Darius turned his gaze to her, the moonlight reflecting in his sharp eyes. "It is alive," he said. "Alive with danger, with secrets, with choices that will shape you and me. Do you understand what that means?" She met his eyes, steadying herself despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "I think I do," she whispered. "I am ready to face it." A faint smile touched Darius' lips, fleeting and rare. "Perhaps," he said, "though readiness is tested only in the moment of reckoning. Come." He led her down to the courtyard where soldiers readied themselves, the clatter of armor and metal echoing in the cold night air. Horses pawed at the ground, tense and aware. Darius handed Arya a light, curved sword, the metal glinting silver in the moonlight. "This is your first test," he said, voice sharp with authority. "Not of strength, not of speed, but of mind, courage, and judgment. The Northern Lords will strike tonight. We cannot wait for them. They will come whether we are prepared or not. You will ride with me. You will observe, you will decide, and you will act." Arya swallowed, heart pounding. She had trained, yes, but never like this. Never had the weight of so many lives depended on her choices, nor the outcome of a battle rested on her decisions. Yet beneath the fear, a spark of determination burned. She would not falter. She could not. The soldiers mounted and fell into formation, the night alive with the soft hiss of wind through armor. Darius led the way, his presence commanding attention and loyalty. Arya followed, scanning the shadows for signs of the enemy, feeling the pulse of danger in every movement. Hours passed as they rode through the darkened forest, the Northern Lords' forces leaving trails of firelight in the distance. Then, just as the moon reached its highest point, the attack began. A sudden shout echoed through the trees. Arrows flew like silver rain, and the clash of steel rang out sharply against the stillness. Darius moved with lethal precision, cutting through the enemy ranks, his movements a blend of strategy and raw power. Soldiers looked to him, inspired by the calm ferocity of their leader. Arya's first encounter was terrifying. A group of Northern scouts broke through the tree line, their weapons glinting. She raised her sword, heart racing, and recalled every lesson Darius had taught her: the stance, the balance, the anticipation. She blocked, parried, and struck with careful precision, each movement tested under the pressure of real battle. "You have courage," Darius called, his voice carrying through the chaos. "But courage without focus is useless. Keep your mind sharp. Observe, choose." Arya took a deep breath and did exactly that. She observed the patterns of the enemy, noticed the slight lag of one soldier, the overconfidence of another. When the moment came, she acted decisively, disarming an opponent and saving a young soldier from a deadly strike. Her heart pounded, but a thrill surged through her. Fear and exhilaration intertwined like fire and ice. By the time the northern scouts were pushed back, dawn's light had begun to creep over the horizon, painting the forest in shades of gray and gold. Darius approached Arya, his expression unreadable, but his eyes glimmered with something that made her chest tighten. "You did well," he said finally. "Better than I expected for one so new to this world. But this was only a test of observation and instinct. The true challenge is yet to come." Arya nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and exhaustion. Her body ached, every muscle burning, yet her mind was alive with awareness, sharper than it had ever been. She looked at Darius, noting the fatigue etched into his features, the same weight she felt. Yet there was no hesitation in him, only clarity, resolve, and a dangerous intensity. They returned to the keep as the morning sun rose fully, lighting the towers and battlements. Soldiers tended to the wounded, and preparations for the inevitable larger battle continued. Darius moved among them, giving instructions, his presence both commanding and reassuring. Arya followed quietly, observing, learning, and feeling an unfamiliar respect for the burden he carried. He was more than a leader, he was a force of nature, shaped by years of war, strategy, and survival. And yet, she sensed an undercurrent of something else. A loneliness, a longing, a shadow that he carried despite all the power around him. In the quiet of the inner courtyard, Arya approached him. "My lord," she began cautiously, "may I ask, why do you continue? Why fight when the cost is so high?" Darius regarded her, the corners of his mouth tugging into the faintest smile. "Because someone must," he said simply. "Because power without use is meaningless, and because a legacy, a true legacy, is forged in fire and shadow. I fight not just for myself, but for the future. For those who will come after me, and perhaps for those who cannot yet fight for themselves." Arya felt the weight of his words settle in her chest. There was truth, but also a hint of sorrow. She wanted to reach out, to bridge the distance she sensed between them, but the knowledge of the world's dangers kept her cautious. The day passed in a blur of preparation. Scouts returned with reports. The northern lords were amassing for a full strike, their numbers greater than anticipated. Darius studied the maps, adjusting plans with meticulous precision. Arya watched, absorbing every movement, every calculation. Strategy, she realized, was as much a weapon as the sharpest blade. As evening approached, a messenger arrived, breathless and anxious. "My lord," he said, "a figure has been seen moving through the northern encampment. Cloaked, silent, watching your forces and whispering to their leaders." Darius' eyes narrowed. "So it begins," he murmured. "There is more at play here than mere ambition. They have allies we do not yet know, and perhaps someone from within, someone who wishes to see us fall." Arya's heart skipped a beat. Danger seemed to coil around them like a living thing, unseen but present. She felt a thrill of fear, and an equally potent thrill of trust in Darius, whose calm command anchored her amidst uncertainty. Night fell, darker than before, and the first skirmishes of the larger battle began. Arya fought alongside Darius' forces, each moment testing her courage, instinct, and resolve. The clash of swords, the cries of men, and the whistle of arrows formed a chaotic symphony. And yet, amidst the chaos, she began to feel a strange clarity, an understanding of her own strength, and of the bond forming between herself and the man who had brought her into this world. Hours passed. Exhaustion threatened to pull her down, but she refused. Every decision mattered, every action had consequences. And when Darius fought beside her, moving like shadow and steel, she realized the depth of his power and the weight of his loneliness. Finally, as the first light of dawn painted the battlefield in shades of gold and red, the northern forces were pushed back, though not defeated. Both sides had suffered, but Blackthorn Keep had held. Darius stood amid the aftermath, surveying the field with eyes that missed nothing. Arya approached him, her body bruised and sore, but her spirit alight with something new: confidence, courage, and an understanding of the cost of power. "You did well," Darius said quietly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You have passed your first trial, but remember this: trials never end. Every victory brings another challenge, and every choice carries weight." Arya nodded, feeling the truth of his words deep in her soul. She had changed tonight. She was no longer just a newcomer to a dangerous world. She was a part of it, shaped by fire, shadow, and the presence of the man who had become both her guide and her mirror. The dawn broke over Blackthorn Keep, pale and trembling, as if the world itself had been watching the night's events with bated breath. Inside the fortress, tension hung thick, heavy as the stone walls themselves. Arya moved quietly through the halls, every step careful, every shadow watched. The message of betrayal had set a new weight upon her shoulders. Someone within the keep had chosen to aid the northern lords. The thought alone made her stomach tighten. Darius stood at the head of the war room, his eyes sharp, body tense. Maps were spread before him, candles flickering in the drafty chamber. His voice was calm but carried an unmistakable edge of danger. "They believe they can break us," he said, "but they have underestimated the strength that comes from loyalty, from knowledge, from trust forged in fire and shadow. We will not falter." Arya stepped forward, feeling both fear and determination mingle within her. "My lord, how do we know who has betrayed us?" Darius did not answer immediately. He moved to a window, looking out at the forest, his face a mask of thought and steel. "Trust is tested not by words, Arya, but by action. Watch, listen, and remember, the eyes of the world see more than the ears. Often the silent ones hold the truth." Arya nodded, absorbing every word. She had learned much in the past days: the dance of power, the value of observation, and the way fear could sharpen the mind rather than paralyze it. Yet she knew this trial would be unlike any before. The enemy was no longer merely outside their walls. The threat was closer, more intimate, more dangerous. The day passed in a tense vigil. Soldiers moved like shadows, scouts returned with fragmented information, and Darius directed preparations with a meticulous hand. Arya followed him, learning to read his gestures, the slightest change in tone, the subtle signs that revealed both danger and strategy. By nightfall, the northern lords made their move. Fires flared in the distance, the first sign of their army advancing under the cover of darkness. Arya and Darius mounted their horses, the weight of responsibility pressing upon them. The betrayal within the keep had yet to reveal itself fully, and that uncertainty made every moment sharper, every decision heavier. As they rode toward the northern army, a shadow moved across the battlements of Blackthorn Keep. A figure cloaked in gray slipped silently through the walls, heading toward the northern lines. Arya caught sight of it just in time, her breath catching in alarm. "Someone is leaving the keep," she shouted, pointing. Darius' eyes narrowed, and without hesitation, he guided his horse into a controlled, swift pursuit. "We cannot let this betrayal continue. Stay close." The forest swallowed them, darkness wrapping around their horses like a living thing. The figure moved with unnatural speed, avoiding the scattered light of torches, and Arya felt her pulse racing, not from fear alone, but from the thrill of the hunt, of the test, of the responsibility placed upon her. Finally, the figure halted near the edge of the northern camp. Darius and Arya approached silently, hidden by shadows. The figure paused, glancing at the enemy lines, and then Arya saw the emblem, a sigil familiar within the keep. "It is a guard," she whispered, disbelief and hurt mingling in her voice. "One of our own." Darius' face remained unreadable, but his hand tightened around the reins. "Betrayal is not born of cruelty alone," he said softly. "Sometimes it is fear, sometimes ambition, sometimes despair. Observe, Arya, learn, and then act." With precise timing, Darius signaled to Arya. She moved first, stepping from the shadows, sword in hand. The guard turned, eyes widening in surprise. Darius followed swiftly, his presence commanding and absolute. "You will not leave this forest," Darius said, voice steady and cold. "Not tonight." The guard hesitated, then faltered. I was only, I thought." "Thought?" Darius asked sharply, eyes glinting. "Thought what? That betrayal could bring honor, that you could serve two masters and survive. You are mistaken, and yet you may have a chance to redeem yourself." Arya stepped forward, meeting the guard's gaze. "If you truly wish to atone," she said softly, "then help us. Help us stop the Northern Lords and prove your loyalty not with words but with action." The guard looked at both of them, torn between fear and the realization of his error. Finally, he nodded. "I will help. I will make it right." Darius studied the guard for a moment longer, then nodded. "Very well, but understand this: redemption is not given lightly. It is earned in fire, in shadow, in choices that matter more than life itself." Together, the three of them returned to the northern lines. The battle had begun in earnest. Flames flickered and the cries of soldiers echoed through the trees. Arya's heart pounded, yet she moved with a calm precision that came from the training and trust Darius had instilled in her. Every decision, every movement was deliberate, and the battlefield became both a challenge and a classroom. Darius led the main strike, cutting through the northern lines with skill that belied his age. He was a force of nature, commanding and unstoppable, but he moved with strategy as well as strength, guiding Arya and the redeemed guard with precision. Arya found herself in moments of terror and triumph, her courage tested with every swing of her sword. She saved soldiers, deflected attacks, and made choices that altered the flow of the battle. The thrill of survival mixed with the fire of determination. Each action proved her growth, her loyalty, and her understanding of the weight of leadership. As dawn broke over the battlefield, the northern forces began to retreat, their lines shattered, their morale broken. Blackthorn Keep had held, yet the scars of the night were visible in the charred trees, the wounded soldiers, and the exhaustion etched into every face. Darius dismounted, surveying the scene with steady eyes. Arya joined him, her body bruised and tired, but her spirit alight with the sense of accomplishment and understanding. "You have done well," Darius said, placing a hand briefly on her shoulder. "Not just in combat, but in judgment. You have proven that courage, loyalty, and observation are as powerful as any sword." Arya met his gaze, feeling a swell of emotion she had yet to name. "Thank you, my lord," she whispered, "for trusting me, for teaching me." Darius looked at her, a rare softness in his expression. "Trust is earned," he said, "and you have earned it, but remember, power is a double-edged sword. Even victories carry consequences." The redeemed guard approached, bowing his head. "I am grateful," he said. "I will spend my life making this right." Darius nodded, acknowledging the words, then turned to Arya. "You see, redemption is possible. For some, it comes through choice. For others, it comes through courage and sacrifice. And for you, Arya, it comes through understanding the weight of power and the strength of the heart that wields it." Arya felt her chest tighten, emotions swirling in a way that made her both light and heavy. She had faced fear, danger, betrayal, and the chaos of battle, and she had survived, grown, and learned. The connection she felt with Darius was undeniable, forged in trials and tempered by trust. They returned to Blackthorn Keep, the sun climbing higher, painting the walls and towers in gold. Soldiers tended to the wounded, scouts reported their findings, and the atmosphere was one of cautious relief. The Northern Lords had been defeated, but not destroyed. The shadow of threat remained, yet the keep had proven resilient. Darius and Arya stood on the balcony overlooking the keep. Silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken understanding. "You have changed," Darius said softly, eyes reflecting the rising sun. "You are no longer the girl who arrived frightened in the shadow of Blackthorn. You are someone who carries strength, courage, and the knowledge that choices define us more than circumstances ever will. Arya looked at him, feeling the depth of his words, and something shifted inside her. "And you?" she asked quietly. "Have you changed too?" Darius paused, looking out over the horizon. "Perhaps," he admitted. "I have learned that even the strongest cannot bear everything alone. That trust and loyalty are as vital as power, and that the heart can still be guided by hope, even in a world of shadows." For a long moment they stood together, the silence between them comfortable, filled with respect, understanding, and the subtle bonds forged in fire and battle. The keep behind them was safe, for now. The northern lords had been repelled, the betrayal within corrected, and the future, uncertain though it remained, felt brighter. Arya finally spoke, voice soft but certain. "I am ready for whatever comes next. I will stand by you, my lord, through shadows, through fire, through all of it." Darius regarded her, a rare warmth in his gaze. "Then together," he said quietly, "we will face the future, and perhaps we will shape it, not with fear alone, but with courage, wisdom, and loyalty. And yes, even hope." The wind whispered through the towers, carrying the scent of pine and earth, as if the keep itself approved. Shadows lingered, threats remained, and the world beyond the walls was vast and dangerous. But for the first time, Arya felt the strength of her place in it. And in the silent understanding between teacher and pupil, between leader and follower, there was a promise. A promise that even in darkness, hearts could find light, and that even in power and shadow, redemption, courage, and love could endure. The end.